Good evening, metalheads, and welcome to another episode of Metal Sanctuary. So, adding some really cool stuff from my vault. One thing I got recently, and one thing I've had for some years, and actually just found to be able to put in this video. So, the first thing I want to do is I want to put out the newest item in my collection, and for most of you guys, at least the older fans like me, or even older than me, probably the single biggest avenue of being able to get heavy metal popular in America was orchestrated through a label called Metal Blade Records. Now, Brian Slagel, who is the founder of Metal Blade Records, basically, he was a huge fan of the new wave of British heavy metal stuff, and found a couple of friends that had stuff in common with these things, and just wanted to basically get his hands on anything he could back then from there. So I mean, he had to go to all kind of record stores and have to request things because this is like 80, 81, and the stuff really isn't popular, especially on the West Coast where Brian was at. And at the time, there was an LA scene that was starting to brew up. Bands like Motley Crue and Rat were starting to come out. Van Halen had already had a couple records, and while a couple of these are kind of just rock bands or whatever, eventually some other metal bands were coming out. Bands like Bitch, Metal Church was starting to kind of get things together. Armored Saint. And then eventually, Brian kind of haphazardly mentioned to Lars Ulrich, who writes a forward in his book, which is what I'm about to share with you. Just kind of was like, yeah, if you get a band, I'll put you on it. And that's the actual first time that Metallica was on an actual record. Their song Hit the Lights was on that record. And then eventually a redone version will be on another compilation on the Metal Massacre compilations, which I believe he ran into about 96 or 97. So anyway, I happened on what was like a panel of some sort that was done, and it had Ryan Slagel, it had Howard Jones of Killswitch Engage, it had Rex Brown of Pantera, it had Frank Bello of Anthrax, Alex Skolnick of Testament. They were all talking about the music business, and towards the end, he kind of mentioned he had a book, and this is was very interesting because I've gotten biographies of musicians and stuff like that to learn more about the musicians, and as any metalhead really will do, or anybody who listens to whatever style of music they listen to, going back and researching the bands that influenced the band you listen to is almost kind of automatic. But this was the first opportunity I saw to actually get to research a metal label. So in doing that, it was like the first thing that popped in my head for the next gift that my wife would give me for whatever reason it would come out. And we were talking the other day, and she said, is there anything you want for our 2-year anniversary? I was like, I know exactly what I want. And within 2 days, this book, For the Sake of Heaviness, The History of Metal Blade Records, was delivered to my doorstep. I just finished reading the entire book this morning. I read a lot of it before then. But this is just an awesome book. It really goes through just like what it really takes to not only start a label basically out of nothing. He started this in his mom's garage, just from how you were getting to listen to different bands. This is, 30 plus years ago, before the internet, before, back when tape trading was the way to find out about bands. And he just had a passion about the bands that he loved and the bands that he was finding, and he just had to get the bands out there. One of the things that he has always stuck to is not necessarily only doing metal bands, because throughout here it'll tell you different kind of subsidiary labels that he would create to have punk bands and to have other bands that really weren't standard metal, but still keeping the metal blade part completely metal. So This book he wrote, I believe in 2017, and so it goes about the entire Metal Blade history from just signing a band like Bitch, which I believe was the first one that did the full complete record of their own on here, all the way to doing contemporary acts such as Amon Amarth. There's some pretty cool pictures in here, not a whole lot, like a couple pages worth of pictures, but like, you know, they got, you know, the flyer from Show No Mercy by Slayer, which was their first 3 releases were actually on Metal Blade. So that's pretty cool to have that on there for the press release. Also, it shows you the first Metal Massacre compilation cover. I have a couple of these on CDs. I just don't remember exactly where they are. Marty Friedman's original band Aloha is on one of those. Here's a picture of Brian interviewing Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden. Really cool stuff. Just a lot of, just some like weird facts too. Like the Metal Blade name was actually kind of influenced by the group Blondie. I'm not going to tell you how, but that's something you got to find out for yourself when you read this. Just like some really off-the-wall stuff, like you wouldn't expect the Goo Goo Dolls to have anything to do with Metal Blade, but there's something in there about this. So this is just like a really, really great book. It's about 171 pages worth of material. Like I said, Lars Ulrich does the forward in the book. And then at the end, there's a few pages where they have Metal Blade artists picking their top 5 Metal Blade records. So like, for instance, and it's not just the artists, even people associated with the label. Also, one of the other kind of cool things he did was being able to introduce comedy before metal shows, and he had guys like Don Jamieson and Jim Florentine out there doing stuff like that. If you heard of them, or if you haven't, they were on a show called That Metal Show, which ran on VH1 Classic for a number of years. It's been discontinued for some stupid reason. But anyway, so guys like John Bush, he's got 3 on here. 3 of his favorites were Gwar, Scumdogs of the Universe, Engine, the self-titled record, and Sacred Right, Surf Nicaragua. I mean, it's got, you know, then you got like Alex Webster from Cannibal Corpse. His favorites on here: Cryptic Slaughter's Money Talks, Slayer's Haunting the Chapel EP, Hallows Eve Monument, Aeon's album Path of Fire, and Sacrifice Forward to Termination. So this is just really awesome book, just to really, you know, delve into what it takes to make a metal label, and also the fact that he was not going to let his artist, when they would partner up with other labels, and the labels say, we don't want the artist to do this, that, and the other, and he'd say, well, then I'm just going to take my artist somewhere else and we'll do it ourselves. He really wanted to make sure that artists had all the freedom they could to create what they wanted to create. The second item I have had for roughly probably about 8 years. I got this as like a when we were at there was a bookstore in a mall at Myrtle Beach, where I also at the same time got the Dave Mustaine book, which I don't have on me, but as soon as I get it, that will be another vault video. But anyway, this is a pretty cool thing. This is Metal, the Definitive Guide, and it's got all the different types of subgenres, at least at this point in time, that exist in heavy metal. And this came out in, I got it in like 2010. It came out, in 2007, the first edition. Forwarded by none other than Rob Halford of Judas Priest, or Halford, whichever way you want to pronounce it. This book has a lot of really cool pictures. It's got a lot of pictures of bands whenever it talks about the band. So what it basically does is it goes, at the very beginning, it starts talking about, you know, how heavy metal was created and who the bands were that were instrumental in this stuff. Of course, obviously, Sabbath is going to be the first one, and then you got Priest and Maiden and stuff like that. But then, you know, you get into some of the bands. So, like, here's a picture of Sabbath from back in the day. That's in here. Then you get into other bands, and you get to the subgenres. So let's, just dig through this a little bit deeper, and we'll find thrash. So here's a picture of a thrash band, Atheist, and it talks about them, and it talks about their discography and stuff like that. Let's see what else we can do. We can pull out Norwegian black metal. Not one of my favorite subgenres, but like, here's a picture of the band Borknagar. And if you look off to the, what would be your right, my left, then there's like a typed out, at the time at least, what the discography and stuff is. So, then it, this is just like really cool. It doesn't show a picture for like all the bands on here, but it does show quite a few, just like band pics. Not a lot of them are like, concert pics or anything. A lot of these are just kind of like portraits of bands and stuff like that. And you've got, let's see if they show it. Like my favorite doom metal band, there's a picture of Candlemass. So this is just a really cool book. It's pretty lengthy. I don't think I ever really properly got through it, because I mean, there's just hundreds of bands in here. And the really cool thing about it is like, if you're like a nostalgic guy like me, I like looking at, even pictures of bands that I knew, and then finding out about a lot of bands I don't know. But what also is cool is if like somebody that really doesn't have a lot of metal history, or they're starting to get into metal, give them this book to look through, and they can just kind of pick through and look at stuff. This book is, and it'll get them ideas of bands to kind of to break into, like especially if they decide that they're really into thrash. They don't have to spend hours on YouTube finding every thrash band. You can find a good bit many under that label here, and that can be what they can start off with. So this book is about 495 pages. So really cool. It basically is like a dictionary of heavy metal. And this is, there are a couple things in here where bands are kind of misplaced in the subgenre, which does happen. I mean, just a lot of times it's kind of, people don't know where to put a band because they're kind of just weird or really didn't fit any subgenre at the time. Like, for instance, Merciful Fate. They got put in the black metal category, and their singer, who did a solo career, or is still doing a solo career, King Diamond, they have him in the power metal category, which there are not a whole lot of differences musically, other than, some keyboard and organ stuff that he uses in King Diamond, and the fact that he does mostly concept albums with King Diamond. But, other than that, I mean, even if it's, not necessarily 100% factual with what bands belong to what subgenre, there is a lot of really good facts about the bands themselves, how they get started, and, their discography, at least up to that point, which was like 2007. So, 11 years has changed. A lot of bands that weren't in here have come along, and I'm sure there's going to be probably another edition, or if there isn't already. Anyway, that's the two things I have to show from the vault today. And as always, stay metal, and God bless.